What if I told you there's a force of nature so powerful it threatens humanity's very existence? One that carries with it death, famine, and climate disasters. What if I told you every waking moment it festers allows it to spread its wasteful rot to every corner of this country? That very force, this grim reaper haunting us all, is this bitch-ass, cookie-cutter-ass house and this boring, bland green lawn. Hey y'all, welcome back. Today, we're going to be discussing a subject near and dear to my heart, the unfettered rot of the suburbs. And before any of you get the wrong impression, I assure you this video ain't going to be some Midwest emo shit like, all there is to do to have fun in this boring town is get drunk before the high school football game. This video will instead be a refined fact and data-based analysis. In this video, I'll be looking at their use of space, their impact on climate change, and how they codify their internal cultures. Without further ado, let's go. Part 1. Waste of space. To dig into the destructive nature of suburbs, we have to talk about space and materials as specifically finite resources. There's only so much land out there to build on, only so many forests to level, only so many cultural sites relevant to native peoples that we've yet to usurp. Just so we're clear, I don't think that's good. I'm just trying to raise awareness of all these resources are finite, not just for us, but for humanity as a whole. And if we're thinking big picture, especially as the world nears resource shortages, we have to ask ourselves what ways of housing people are the most and least efficient. To discuss the inefficiencies of suburbs, let's first look at America's most efficient city. I'm walking here. Because so many people live in so few square miles, the majority of the city's buildings maximize space in a really simple way. The ground floor of most of them is a shop, whether that be a restaurant, grocery store, or karate dojo, and right above said shops are apartments. This not only maximizes the amount of things you can provide with a single city block, but it allows for a small number of city blocks to provide all the basic necessities for its residents. Speaking as someone who spent a lovely 6 months in NYC before the plague hit, everything I needed was within walking distance from my apartment. From my groceries to my daily Crunchwrap Supreme, it was all just a hop, skip, and a jump for me. The whole model's incredibly efficient for organizing a city. It's so efficient, in fact, that we could fit the entire world population into just the state of Texas with that population density. And similarly, we could house every US citizen in Vermont and New Hampshire, which is so wild. We think of living accommodations as requiring way more space than that, but the reality is we can live off these models quite well and use up way less space. The fact is, cities are a really efficient way to organize a population. Except for Los Angeles, that fucker is spread out with reckless abandon. They use less space, they keep shopping near the residents, all good shit. Suburbs, however, are the most inefficient way to organize populations. Holy shit, are these fuckers wasteful. Houses spread farther than the eye can see, with each cookie-cutter-ass house taking up way more space than necessary. Suburban shopping centers are disconnected from the housing areas. So if your little crybaby of an offspring wants a soda on a whim, your ass has got to drive all the way over here to shut his little ass up. Now there's a couple ways we could measure their waste of space, but for the moment let's just look at housing. From what I've read, the average plot of land for a suburban home is 60 by 120 feet. The average house has about 4.5 people in it, but since you can't order half a kid from the baby salesman, let's just round up to 5. On that same 60 by 120 plot of land, you could fit 6 1,200 square foot apartments on each floor. If we assume 3 to 5 people could live in each apartment, that means a complex of reasonably sized apartments could house 18 to 30 people per floor. So even in areas with strict building codes, you're looking at 50 to 150 people housed on the same plot of land a suburban home uses to house 5 people. That capacity is running anywhere from 10 to 3% efficiency, which isn't even to calculate the space lost by having businesses disconnected from homes and miles away with roads in between. It's a glaring inefficiency of city planning. And I kinda get it. As someone who lived in the tiniest broom closet of a New York apartment, it's tempting to want every living space to be a well-sized individual house. But that luxury is at the specific expense of wasting more space and more resources than are necessary. And at this point you might ask, well, what's even the problem with using all this space and all these resources? I mean, they're here, aren't they? Why not use them? I'll give you one simple answer. Part 2. Climate change. First, it's important to highlight that the building sector emits more greenhouse gases than any other sector in our economy. The semis and machines for logging, the emissions it takes to drive them out to the site, crew driving out every morning, it all adds up. And when you tack on the emissions from making each individual house, as well as the emissions needed to create the materials you're building with, well, you've got yourself quite a carbon footprint. Now obviously apartment buildings take more resources, they are larger after all, and I may not be a construction planner or a climate scientist, so I don't know the details, but I am a gambling man. Seriously, I'm in gambling debt with the local mob, please don't tell anyone you've seen me. I'm willing to bet that when you factor in the emissions saved from having to clear 10 to 20 times less land, the added emissions from building a larger apartment end up less carbon per person than for suburban housing projects. Come on, baby. Papa needs to be validated in the marketplace of ideas. Hooray, I was right. Urban areas trend toward less carbon output. Eat that, bitch. Furthermore, let's go back to this lovely, and by lovely I mean depressing, shot of suburban sprawl. Aside from the houses, what one structure dominates this image, The fucking roads! Because suburbs have endless acres of housing and shopping is in a centralized location, you need a lot of roadways to connect everything, the construction of which emits a lot of greenhouse gases. Remember this little doohickey, which we've all seen in the Disney Pixar film Cars? Look at this shit, it's guzzling gas like a motherfucker. Now imagine, if you will, Lightning McQueen dragging that thing all around the suburbs to build every road needed to sustain that lifestyle. That's the problem with suburbs, don't you see? You're overworking Lightning McQueen. Not to mention, again, driving all the way into town just to get little Timmy his grape soda. The ungrateful bastard. This layout makes routine shopping greenhouse gas emission heavy, or at least heavier than it needs to be. Also, for a variety of reasons, not the least of which includes suburbs being rich and developers just not caring, public transportation is often lacking in suburbs, which means most everyone drives individual cars to and from work every day, emitting a heap of greenhouse gases in the process. And even if everyone in these rich-ass suburbs drove electrical cars, it would still harm the environment, because the production of each individual car creates a lot of emissions on its own. It's due to about a bajillion external factors. Hard to determine the precise impact of these choices, but it's clear this layout is way more harmful to the environment than the alternatives. Lastly, lawn care is a surprisingly climate-unfriendly process. Because rigid community rules call for lawns to be well maintained, we end up using a lot of water and emitting a lot of gases just to keep these bland green lawns short. Again, if we just plowed less nature to make room for the houses, we wouldn't have to give people these individual little pockets of nature, they'd just have nature nearby. And let's be clear, even if you think that having individual houses is nice, the rigid rules around lawn care are odd and, at least in a climate sense, more trouble than they're worth. But that fact gets us to another harmful aspect of the suburbs. Part 3. Monoculture. To discuss suburban monoculture, let's travel back to New York City. Yes, I know I'm a cliche for never shutting up about living in New York, but let me reminisce on a time the world wasn't ending, goddammit. If you live anywhere outside of like Midtown, you'll notice the city's culture is hella diverse. Within walking distance of my apartment was Thai food, Mexican food, Vietnamese food, Chinese food, Caribbean food, Puerto Rican food, and stuff from a bunch of other countries, all run by families that, to my knowledge, immigrated from those countries. And like, that's not just the food lover in me soy-facing about all the cool options. Rather, it's a neat reflection of a city teeming with a bunch of different types of people, all having a bunch of different things to contribute to the city's culture. Like, the music's great and diverse, the art's great and diverse, the perspectives on the world super varied. It's all just really cool and lively. It's also important to note that being around a bunch of different types of people, specifically those of different racial and ethnic backgrounds, helps people be less prejudiced and judgmental. Hooray for diversity, woo! Suburbs, however, are the most consumerist, bland, big business-centric, and impersonal places to live. And don't even get me started on the boring architecture of these places, or we'll be here all day. And this isn't just a gripe about restaurant or grocery store selection, it's about a refined monoculture of bougie nonsense and endless consumerism. Not to mention the worst kind of consumerism, that which funnels money into multi-billion-dollar companies instead of local businesses. And it just strikes me as sour for the spirit to be constantly surrounded by such bland consumerism. There's no creativity here, no life to be had in all these big gray buildings. It's all just clean, inoffensive, focus group tested consumer centers, and it sucks. Oh, what's that? There's science behind my claim? Oh, what a lucky day for me. Whole Foods, 0. Lively setting, 10,000 points. It's important to note that this is a problem some lazy apartment developers fall into. If you make the kind of efficient apartment complex we've been touching on, but you make it just a giant gray cube, that's not exactly good for the spirit either. It's important to find some ways to make the housing itself lively so people, enjoy the experience of being alive. What a concept. It also cannot be overstated how much suburbs engender uniformity. From the rotating set of cookie-cutter building designs to the strict rules about lawns, and don't worry, suburban lawns, I'm not through with you yet. Every family is asked or required to assimilate to a very specific culture. Want a cute, bold house color? Want to grow some fun plants up in here? Want to maybe use some of this space for the massive homeless populations that are popping up in urban centers? It also doesn't help that the folks in these suburbs are largely in the same income bracket, leading to the tastes of upper middle class folks to dominate the unspoken and explicit rules of the suburbs. While the economic makeup of suburbs is shifting just a bit, the pricey culture and overall aesthetics of the suburbs remain resilient and still dominate most suburban landscapes. Also, I had a heftier bit about this subject until I realized others on the YouTube have said it better than I ever could. The history of suburbs is rooted in segregation, and suburbs still struggle to be entirely available to or inclusive of people of color. Suburbs, as we understand them, emerged from federal housing projects after World War II, in which the subsidies mainly went to white-only communities. With the houses originally exclusive to white people, and with their financial benefits largely staying in the family, coupled with the lack of growing wealth from non-white communities since segregation, suburbs trend toward a homogenized culture that treats whiteness as the default. The folks you'll see go viral every so often for accosting people of color in gated communities aren't exactly acting stochastically. Rather, they're reflecting a larger historical problem of suburbs treating non-white people as outsiders. And we are getting better about it, but it's still a problem. If you want a more in-depth look at the subject, folks like Adam over at Adam Ruins Everything cover the subject with a grace and correctness that I just couldn't quite find the right words for at the moment, but I'd be doing a disservice to the topic of suburban monocultures if I didn't at least bring it up, so here you go. Lastly, to go back to lawns for a moment, the monocultures around lawn care are incredibly harmful, in the sense that it makes everything boring, which in my book is the worst kind of crime imaginable. Like, America has such cute, unique little climates sprinkled throughout. There's no reason local shrubs, or ferns, or succulents shouldn't populate every lawn in America. This shit looks dope. But that wouldn't fit the refined, bougie culture these developments want to engender as they price gouge their tenants. So they force the cultivation of really clean and flaccid lawns. This shit looks like shit, yo. Part 4. Conclusion. We've covered a lot in this video. from the silly to the serious. But I want to hammer home here at the end that whatever comforts we might find in the suburbs come at the expense of various harms. We press the turbo button on climate change. We continue to level forests and impede on native land. We cultivate anti-individual, consumerist neighborhoods. We cover half the ground in asphalt. We funnel money into the pocket of business owners who live halfway across the country, all in service of having a cookie-cutter-ass home with live, laugh, love signs scattered about that you walk into one day to find your spouse having an affair with the gardener, who you were also having an affair with on the side. So now you're torn about which person to be angrier at. And point is, we're going through a lot of destructive waste for very minor and privileged conveniences. I'm not trying to say we should criminalize the suburbs or anything like that. I'm just saying that the choices we or Americans around us are making are incredibly destructive. It's probably too late to undo the damages as the forests are already cleared and the climate apocalypse quickly approaching us. But if any city planners are watching this video and have a project for a new suburban development on their desk, I guess to you I'd say, please don't, or I'll kill you. Just a thought. Anyway, thanks for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to toss me one of them likes and subscribe down below. Make sure to ring that little bell and set the notifications to all so you can know the exact nanosecond I release my next video. Special thanks to all my lovely patrons, like those whose names are currently on screen. Through their generous support, I'm able to keep this content train a-rollin'. So make sure to join me on Patreon if you want to support the channel and get access to exclusive content. Also, sorry for this week's video mix-up. I naively assumed the script for Aaron Sorkin's To Kill a Mockingbird was out and readily available, which shouldn't have been that hard to look up before I made those big promises, but oh well, all I've done is make an ass of myself, right? No harm there. Anyway, once I can find a copy of the script, I'll make a follow-up video. Thanks much, and I'll see you next time.